This all started about a year ago. I live on the second floor of an apartment complex and have lived here my entire life. The building is mostly comprised of families with young children and married couples. A lot of the families have lived here as long as my family has, so everyone knows each other pretty well. There is only one apartment unit that isn't occupied by a family, but rather by a pair of brothers who keep to themselves. One day, one of their sons, around my age, appeared out of the blue. He was strange off the bat. He would always wear a sweatshirt with the hood up and would run through the apartment complex to get to his apartment. I'm not sure what his face looks like because he always had the hood over his face. He lived on the first floor and would often get into his place by jumping through the window. He basically did everything in his power to avoid any interaction. I didn't mind him because I never saw him due to my busy schedule. However, one day he started sitting on the top of staircase that leads to my apartment. This was strange because his apartment unit was on the other side of the complex and on the first floor. I brushed it off at first, but it started happening every day. When I would come home from school, he was there. When my boyfriend at the time would drop me off at night, typically around 10:30 to 11 p.m., he would be there. Sometimes when I would leave and come back hours later, he would still be in the exact same spot as if he didn't move through the 5+ hours I was gone. At this point, I told my parents and my boyfriend about it, and they became very vigilant. My boyfriend would park his car and walk me to my door every night he dropped me off. Once he saw my boyfriend, he stopped sitting on the staircase, and I thought it was over, but it wasn't. He started waiting for me at my bus stop. The bus I take home from school stops right across the street from my home, so it's a short walk. One day when I was getting off, I saw him waiting at the bus stop. Once he saw me get off, he followed me into the complex and sat on the staircase. He also started following me when I would walk my dog. At this point, my parents were upset. My mom started letting the neighbors know he was following me around. My neighbors started making sure he wasn't bothering me, or if I was alone, they would start a conversation with me until I got into my door. One day I got a friend request on Facebook from this guy. Mind you, he had never spoken a word to me, so how did he know my name, let alone find me on Facebook? My mom tried talking to his father, but they would never answer the door when my mom knocked on their door. So I'm thinking, it can't possibly get any worse, right? He seemed harmless, so I wasn't too worried. I was wrong. One day when I returned from my boyfriend's house, my mom told me she had something to tell me, but she didn't want me to get spooked. She proceeded to tell me that when she was walking towards the kitchen to get a glass of water, she saw something in the tree move. Our kitchen has a huge window that takes up most of the wall. In front of the window, there's a huge tree. If someone were to climb the tree, you could see into our apartment. Well, guess what? When my mom took a closer look, she realized my neighbor was sitting in the tree looking straight into the apartment. My mom called my dad over, and when my neighbor saw my dad, he jumped off the tree. At that moment, I felt my peace stolen from me. We filed a police report, but when the police went looking for him, he was gone. It turned out there were snack wrappers and a blanket hidden in between the leaves of the trees. The police think that wasn't the first time he was up on J-Tree. I couldn't help but to wonder how many times he saw me walking around, and I had no idea. It's been about 6 months and I haven't seen him since. His father still lives in the complex, but there's no sight of him. The police haven't been able to find him, so I have no idea what happened to him, but I hope we never meet again. When I was 25, there was a short time I was staying at my aunt's. It was her, my 2 cousins, and I. She lives in a nice apartment complex, and her unit is on the lower level. Her living room has a lot of windows that she keeps open for fresh air. Her unit happens to be on the corner near a grassy courtyard path. When I had first moved in, I noticed a man who gave me an off vibe. My cousins and aunt said he lived upstairs and 2 units over, recovering from hard drugs that permanently messed him up. His parents paid for him to stay there as they didn't want him with them. They also said other than hearing him mumble and say weird things, no one had ever had an issue. My aunt works nights and leaves at 3 a.m. My younger cousin works nights and leaves at 2 a.m. That usually left my same-aged cousin and I the only 2 there until we leave for work around 8. For context, it is a very open living room to dining room plan. My aunt always has people staying over, so she has a second couch in the dining room in place of a table. This was where I slept. She stayed on the one in the living room. My aunt has also never been one to lock her doors, until this incident. One night I'm on my phone trying to sleep at about 1 a.m. and hear a man yelling. He's yelling, "Don't shoot," and banging on the door to the right of ours. 2 male college students live there and just told him he had the wrong apartment and to leave. He says sorry and walks off. I am looking through the kitchen window, which is in direct line of sight from my couch bed, and it's the weird neighbor who sees me and grins. He then walks back to his home. I was unsettled, but not enough to wake anyone else up over it. Told my family nonchalantly the next day in a LOL that was weird way. My cousin and I watch a movie and head off to bed. I have a very hard time staying asleep, but I woke up to the feeling of someone watching me. I check my phone and it's around 3:30 a.m., so I know it's not my aunt or cousin. I sit up and figure I'll go watch TV on my aunt's couch since she was gone already. The feeling gets stronger as I am in the living room. Then I see the shadow of a person standing still in the grass courtyard looking in. I froze. I immediately go back to my couch to get my phone. As I do, the person is gone. I am now trying to calm myself down and think of waking my cousin up when I hear the creepy man's voice. He is now at the kitchen window, which looks out directly in front of her front door. I drop to the floor out of his line of sight and start frantically trying to call my cousin. The man is now saying things like, "I'm not going to hurt you," and "I'm unarmed," over and over again. His face is up against the window. Then he starts talking about wanting to pet the cats he saw through the window. I can't get a hold of my cousin. It's been 20 minutes of this at this point. I didn't have many options. I could jump up and run for a knife, but I'd need to go to the kitchen. I could try to respond and ask him to leave, but I've learned that when you underestimate someone crazy, you lose every time. I now hear him knocking while repeating his nonsense. I'm doing that ridiculous-looking army crawl snake slither across the floor down the hall. I see the door handle start to turn. I'm about to jump up when my cousin bursts out of his room directly across from the front door. Now, he's not the biggest guy, but boy was he intimidatingly mad at the circus show taking place at his front door. He starts yelling at the guy that he needs to get the fuck off of his porch and that he's calling the cops. The man tries to say, "I'm unarmed. I'm not going to hurt you, don't be afraid." My cousin goes off and yells, "It's 4 a.m., you need to leave or I'll call the cops, what is wrong with you?" So the guy backs up with his hands in the air and leaves. Needless to say, we didn't go back to sleep. My aunt was called and she called the apartment manager. The next day when I came home from work, his parents were there packing moving boxes into a truck. Maybe he was trying to get me to open the door by seeming friendly. Maybe he had a bad trip and really wanted to pet a cat to feel better. I guess we will never know. We have lived in our neighborhood for nearly 4 years. A few houses down and across the street is a Filipino family. They are nice, and whenever we see each other, we always have small talk and we know each other by name. We moved in right before I gave birth to my oldest, so they always ask for the baby, and he loves seeing them. We have even had meals at each other's homes. This summer, they had an older family member, maybe 55 to 60 years old, come to visit. We noticed him right away because he would always go for long walks and lingered a lot. One evening, the mother of the family introduced him as her father. He had recently moved and would be staying with them for a while before heading north to her sister's house. He was new to the US and spoke a little English, enough to get by. He seemed nice enough, but as soon as we walked inside, I told my husband he gave me a weird vibe. I had never felt that way about any of the 7 other family members from the home. I have been in their home and shared meals with them. They are very sweet and welcoming. My husband told me he did seem a little off, but we chalked it up to cultural differences. Fast forward about a month, my Mill and mother come to visit at the same time. They are in the driveway with our son. I run inside because I am pregnant and suffer from severe morning sickness. I come back out 15 minutes later and they are having a frustrating conversation with this man. He was trying to get one of them to drive him to the store, and he would use food stamps to buy their groceries and wanted them to give him cash. They both told him they weren't interested, but he kept asking and lingering. When I went out, I called out to my husband to come out, and when he saw us, he walked away quickly. Our mothers told us what happened and how forceful he was. The next few days I see him walking. We wave and say simple pleasantries, but every time I would wave, he would take it as a sign to come over and try to have a conversation. I let him know what he did with our mothers is illegal, and to be so forceful was unnecessary. He said he understood, but he would linger. It would always be at a moment where I was trying to strap my toddler in his car seat, and I was rushing to get him to school. It would take me 10 minutes to get him to get the hint that I couldn't talk, and he would slowly walk away and linger in our driveway. It got to the point where I would watch to see if he had walked past our house on his morning walk before venturing outside. I hated the awkward conversation. He would always seem to round the corner just as I finished strapping my son in the car and I was getting in. I would wave and jump in quickly and drive off. It just felt off, like he was waiting for me. Our neighbor across the street one night told me she got a weird vibe off of him as well, and he always lingered. She told me he did similar things with her when they were outside. They were opting to hang in the backyard with the kids to avoid it altogether. I usually work from home, but one day I went into the office and I was alerted by the Ring camera. This man was standing and looking in through our kitchen window, just peering, and I could hear our pit bull barking. When he saw our dog, he jumped back and I used the microphone to say, "Can I help you? What do you want?" He looked shocked and scurried away. I called my husband and told him to play the Ring video. We both thought it was really creepy. When we saw the family walking that evening, we brought it up to his daughter. She spoke to her father and he claimed it never happened. We showed her the video on her phone and he said he must have gotten lost. The daughter seemed annoyed by him and the situation, so him being weird calmed down a bit after that. I could see his daughter was annoyed by his behavior, and as they were walking, there was a heated conversation. She later told me he tends to be overly friendly and he means no harm, but she talked to him and he would leave us alone. I asked if he had a mental issue or maybe Alzheimer's since he was getting lost. She told me that he had always acted like that and she couldn't wait till her sister was ready for him to be sent up north to her. A few other neighbors had complained to her and the homeowners association. About 2 months later, I dropped my son off to preschool. I get home and have to rush in because I feel sick. Usually I leave my car door open, but something told me to lock it as I got out. I did as I was rushing inside. I also would normally leave the door unlocked if I was just going for a quick throw-up session, but again my instinct said to lock the bottom and top lock. When I was in the bathroom, right by the front door throwing up my life, I hear a rattling at the front door. Someone is turning the lock back and forth. Of course my ring chimes and I look at it in between heaves. It is the old man. He is trying to get into our house. I go over the microphone and say, "You are at the wrong house." And he responds, "Let me in now. I want to tell you something." Best English sentence I had ever heard from someone who wasn't that good with English. I felt better pretty quickly and was on alert. I responded with, "What do you want to tell me?" He looked right at the camera. "Let me in right now. Let me in your house now." This is where I panicked. He knew he was at the wrong house, but he was continuing. I respond, "Please get off my property. I don't feel comfortable with you here and I am not letting you in." And then he rattles at the door again hard and tries to pull it open and starts knocking on the bathroom window. This is where I get pissed. "Get the fuck off my goddamn property. I'm not gonna let you in, you fucking creep. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the cops." He steps back and gives the camera the middle finger and scurries off. He disappears. I run upstairs and see that he is simply walking back to his house. I let the pit bull out of our bedroom where he had been going nuts. I call my husband and he tells me to call the daughter. I call her and tell her what happened and she told me not to let him in. She just warned me that he has been inappropriate and forceful with women in her family, and she didn't want me to get hurt, especially being pregnant. She comes over about an hour later and I show her the video. She is fuming and apologetic and begs me not to call the cops. She promises me he will be gone the next day. The next day, he flies out and his daughter told him he is no longer welcome in her home. He now lives up north in Maryland with his other daughter, probably harassing other people. I honestly don't know what would have happened if I didn't follow my instincts that day.